Hello everyone and welcome to the Automotive Dialogues. My name is Ron Melster. I'm an intacs-certified Principal Assessor for Automotive SPICE since 2005 and an official trainer for ASQMS. And with me is my co-host Sohil Dhar. He's currently a project manager at Volkswagen Infotainment. He's a provisional assessor for Automotive SPICE with a long list of additional certifications like Agile SPICE, and what impresses me most, has done a special program on automotive cybersecurity. So he's some kind of white hacker. Welcome, Sohil. As this is the first episode of this podcast, here is the idea behind it. Each time, Sohil and I take one question that moves us and discuss about it. There will be no presentations, just the topic and us. We might disagree on some aspects, then you will hear it. If you find this content valuable, please consider subscribing to the channel. If you want us to discuss a specific topic, let us know in the comments. And if you want to be a guest here, you can contact us on LinkedIn. Today, we will discuss the question, is Automotive SPICE built for what comes next? Sohil, what is your observation? What is happening in the automotive industry right now?
Hello, Ron. Thank you for the warm introduction, and it's truly a pleasure to be here and co-host the Automotive Dialogues. When we look at the automotive industry and what's happening in the overall automotive development today, we are really witnessing a fundamental shift in the entire industry. Historically, the automotive evolution was driven by mechanical innovation initially and later by electronics, moving from purely hardware-centric systems to ECUs managing specific functions. But today, the paradigm is changing rapidly. We are no longer dealing with isolated control units and traditional supplier models. Instead, we are moving towards highly integrated software defined architectures. Modern ECUs have evolved into powerful compute platforms, and the vehicle itself is becoming a connected, continuously upgradable system. This shift is overall reshaping the entire technological landscape, blurring the lines between automotive software and cloud ecosystems. At the same time, development approaches are also transforming. We are seeing adoption of software-driven methodologies like Agile, CI/CD, and scale frameworks such as SAFe. The focus is now on building faster, integrating continuously, and deploying rapidly, very similar to what we have seen in the tech industry for years. All of this is enabling the rise of software defined vehicles, or famously the buzzword SDVs, and even more advanced concepts like AI driven vehicles, where machine learning plays a crucial role in perception, decision making, and personalization. So, in summary, I would like to emphasize on the fact that the automotive industry is no longer just about building cars, it's about building intelligent, evolving platforms powered by software, data, and continuous innovation.
Yes, the automotive industry is changing rapidly from a hardware-centric to a software-defined or even AI-defined vehicle. I remember a situation when I was at Audi. The development had said, this is the century where we connect the ECUs within the car. And in the next century, we connect the car with the outside world. This was around 2008, and he was right. So now we see another significant shift. However, there's a main difference. Everything is changing at the same time, and everything is changing so fast. So we, as the automotive industry, must adapt to this. Now the question is, how fast is ASPICE changing, and is this fast enough?
That's a very provocative question, and I really like it. It challenges a lot of assumptions within our industry. And now, if we take a step back, and ask why ASPICE was introduced in the first place, It was introduced in order to bring structure, predictability and quality into the overall automotive software development, especially when the systems were becoming more and more complex and safety critical. And in that sense, I must agree that ASPICE has done an excellent job. It excels in areas like process discipline, risk management, and ensuring consistent quality across global teams and suppliers. And these are still absolutely critical today, arguably even more, I would say, given the rise of software defined vehicles and increasing system complexity. So, do we still need ASPICE? I would say yes, we definitely need ASPICE. It remains highly relevant because it provides a strong foundation for engineering rigor and compliance, which you cannot compromise on in automotive industry. However, where the discussion becomes more interesting is not about dropping a spice, but about evolving it. The industry today is, moving towards faster development cycles like CI/CD, Agile, AI-driven software development, while a spice traditionally, I would say, follows a more structured and sometimes slower approach. So I would say the real question is, how do we adapt a spice to better align with the speed without losing its strengths? In my view, ASPICE is not at all outdated. Again, I would like to emphasize on the fact that ASPICE is not at all, outdated. It still remains highly relevant, but it does need to continuously evolve to stay in sync with the pace of innovation in the automotive world.
But in the meantime, the VDA guidelines have been published to help us with the interpretation of the Automotive SPICE PAM. And by the way, I've heard that version 4.1 will be released by the VDA in the coming weeks, together with the corresponding third edition of the VDA guidelines. So we don't need ASPICE anymore at all. It's outdated or lagging behind anyway.
That's really an interesting question, and one that comes up quite often when we talk about process maturity versus industry speed. And if you look at Automotive SPICE, it actually took nearly 6 years. Again, I would like to emphasize on the fact that it took them nearly 6 years to evolve from version 3.1, which was released somewhere in November 2017, to version 4.0, which was released in November 2023. And if you see, that's a significant time frame, especially when you compare it to how fast the automotive industry is changing, how fast the technological landscape within the automotive industry is evolving. It's driven by software defined vehicles. You have artificial intelligence, or nowadays the buzzword is artificial intelligence defined vehicles. Then you have faster release cycles and new development models like Agile, CI/CD kicking in. So I do need to admit that ASPICE, the Automotive SPICE framework, is of course evolving. But on the other hand, I must agree to the fact that it is evolving in relatively long cycles. And even looking ahead, future updates like version 4.1 are still expected to follow multi-year release patterns. And therefore, I would like to ask the real question, which is whether that pace is fast enough to keep up with an industry that's increasingly moving towards rapid iteration, continuous deployment, and software-driven innovation.
ASPICE was always designed to measure the achievement of the purpose based on the observation of work products. And this is still possible even with new upcoming technologies. However, what is missing is guidance on how to implement the requirements and the concepts defined by Automotive SPICE. So, do you think that these concepts, which are defined and measured by Automotive SPICE, are outdated?
Again, that's really an interesting question. And one thing which we all need to recognize or emphasize upon is the fact that ASPICE isn't a one size fits all framework anymore. It needs to be tailored, it needs to be adapted, interpreted based on the scope and the context of the project. Let me give you an example. For example, if you see software one process area, that's the software requirements analysis process area. There we have a base practice 4 that talks about analyzing the impact on the operating environment. So if you see this base practice, the expectations of this base practice can vary quite a lot depending on whether you are developing or dealing with an embedded software in an ECU, or you're talking about some sort of backend services which are hosted within a cloud environment. That's why, as I said in the beginning, tailoring becomes really critical. We need clearer guidelines and, more importantly, domain expertise to apply Automotive SPICE meaningfully rather than mechanically. So it's not about changing the Automotive SPICE framework itself every time, but about, adapting how we implement it to match today's diverse automotive software landscape.
What other challenges do you see with implementing ASPICE for the teams in the practice?
That's again a pretty interesting question. And let me start by saying this, Ron. Many of the core ASPICE concepts which are there, included within the Automotive SPICE framework, they were, written like 20 years ago, or I think even more than that. And at that time, the automotive reality was completely different to what we have today. Today, we have fast paced software driven development. Then, on the other hand, you have multiple SPICE frameworks, coming up, which at times could feel like, they are adding more complexity rather than enabling the teams. But again, I would like to emphasize on the fact that ASPICE isn't outdated. The foundation is still strong. The foundation is still quite robust. It brings structure, it brings traceability and quality discipline, which are absolutely necessary in safety critical automotive systems. And the real opportunity, you know, I would like to say this, the real opportunity is not to discard Automotive SPICE framework, but to simplify it and tailor it based on your project scope, your project context. And we need to adapt overall the expectations to to modern development models and avoid over engineering our processes. If applied pragmatically, ASPICE can still be highly relevant even in today's agile software defined vehicle world. Let's discuss further, what exactly I meant by tailoring the expectation of the base practice depending upon the context of the project itself, the project scope and the project context. So let's take the very same example. So in software requirements analysis process area, SW1, we have this base practice 4 that talks about analyzing the impact on the operating environment. So let's say what happens in case we are developing a software which will run in an ECU. So let's say in that case, if we are developing a software for an embedded ECU, we have to evaluate the impact on the software as well as, the other systems as well to which the software itself shares an interface to. So you have to evaluate the impact not only on the software which is being developed, but also on the other systems, the other software, or the other components to which your software in scope shares an interface to. Now let's discuss a bit, what really happens in case if we are developing some sort of backend services which will be hosted in a cloud-based environment. So in that case, how your base practice 4 would look like. Your base practice 4 then, needs to be tailored accordingly, as I said, depending upon the project scope and context. In that case, your operating environment would be the entire runtime ecosystem in which you will be developing that service, in which that service would execute in the end. And what would this include? This will include your cloud infrastructure. This would include your container platforms, like, for example, Kubernetes, then the runtime, then the network ecosystem, the network environment itself, like, APIs, gateways, then external dependencies like third-party APIs, then your observability stacks like, logging, monitoring, and tracing. So what I wanted to emphasize on is the fact that when we talk about the core principles of systems and software engineering which are specified within the Automotive SPICE framework, they remain highly relevant and can continue to be applied effectively with appropriate tailoring based on the specific product, service, or development context. So you don't have to, thought of a different base practice as such. You just need to understand, okay, I have a base practice, so how this base practice needs to be implemented in an embedded world. If I'm developing a software for an embedded ECU, and what would be the expectation of this base practice if I'm developing a backend services, some sort of backend services which are being hosted in a cloud-based environment.
So to summarize, Sohil, what is your recommendation for the ASPICE community?
My message for the entire community would be, that ASPICE is not outdated, but it does need to evolve faster. If you look at the pace of change in automotive today with software-defined vehicles, AI, continuous delivery, these development models are evolving much quicker than before. ASPICE at its core is built on strong principles. It's built on strong fundamentals like process discipline, traceability, and quality assurance, and all these are still relevant today. The fundamentals of software engineering, the fundamentals of system engineering have not changed. They are still the same. But what does need to change is how flexibly we interpret and apply those principles. So rather than treating ASPICE as a rigid checklist, we really need to focus on its intent and adapt it to the modern development or modern ways of working like Agile, CI/CD, or cloud-based development. It's really about, I would say, being principle driven but execution flexible. So in short, my message to the community, to the entire community, would be that ASPICE isn't the problem. The speed of its evolution and how we apply it in today's context is where this conversation needs to be.
From my point of view, what is missing is clear guidance on how to apply the ASPICE concepts and guidance for the people doing the work. It should be about developing software systematically in growing complexity and diversity. Because the software will live much longer than we think today. And then the future developer will need information about your design decisions you are taking at the moment. Thank you, Sohil, for joining me today. Next time on the Automotive Dialogues, we will discuss the topic connected cars, increased risks, who is protecting your vehicle. See you next time, and may your design decisions outlive you.